Nero Wolfe and the case of the blonde scandal. It was the sort of rain that stained coats, clung to your hair, and made cab drivers moody. Manhattan had drowned itself in grey by the time I unlocked the front door of the brownstone and shed my overcoat like a skin I didn't need. Fritz had the smell of roasted chestnuts drifting from the kitchen, which meant we'd eat on time, and Wolfe would not be in a temper. I hung my hat, flicked the water from my cuffs, and stepped into the office. Wolfe was in his chair, the yellow one, nose deep in the Gazette. His lips curled ever so slightly when I creaked a floorboard. "No clients scheduled," he said without lowering the paper. "She's not scheduled," I replied. At that, he did lower the paper, but only enough to peer over the edge. "She, the sort of woman even you would notice, sir," I said. "Tall, blonde, tailored coat. Looks like trouble packed into a perfume ad." He sighed. "Confound it, Archie. The orchids." I stepped closer. Fritz intercepted her on the stoop. She refused to leave a name, said the matter involved a man your age who made a great many decisions during the Roosevelt administration. Wolfe exhaled heavily and folded the paper. "Show her in. But if she utters the phrase, 'You're my last hope,' I shall excuse myself." I went to the hall and opened the door. She stood perfectly still in the vestibule. Her gloves were pale suede. Her handbag gleamed. Her eyes, steel-coloured under ash-blonde lashes, flicked up to mine with just enough tremble to make it clear she'd rehearsed the moment. "Miss Temple?" I said. "Yes, Vivian Temple." She extended a gloved hand. I took it lightly. She didn't press. I guided her into the office. Wolfe remained seated. He didn't rise for most men, let alone women, and he certainly didn't rise for theatrics. She hesitated near the red chair. "Please," I said, indicating it. She sat with her back straight, her eyes scanning the room once. Wolfe's orchid schedule rested on his lap. "You are Miss Vivian Temple?" he asked flatly. "Yes, daughter of the late Councilman Raymond Temple." That name landed like a pin in a silent room. Wolfe raised a brow. "You knew him?" she asked. "No, I read newspapers, and I dislike men who reform other men for a living." "What do you want?" She breathed slowly, removed one glove. "I believe I'm being blackmailed," she said, "over something that never directly involved me. But if exposed now, it could undo a great deal." Wolfe shifted slightly, not enough to call it interest, but enough that I leaned on the edge of my desk rather than take my usual chair. "I'll need specificity," Wolfe said. She opened her handbag and removed a folded envelope. Inside it, a photograph, not old, not new. The corners were creased. The image, a younger version of herself, standing beside a man in dark-rimmed glasses and a suit too sharp for an amateur. Her hand was looped around his arm. Her face was bright. His was unreadable. "Do you recognize him?" she asked. Wolfe looked once and nodded. "Julian Lowry, also known as Trask in campaign circles. Fixer, once indicted, never convicted. Disappeared, then reappeared as someone's deputy policy advisor." Her throat tightened. "He worked closely with my father." Wolfe said nothing. "I was 18, she continued. "It was nothing more than an afternoon, a campaign photo op. I never thought of it again. Until last week. When that photo arrived with no note, no threat, no demand, just the photo." Wolfe grunted. "Then came the phone call," she added. "A man, deep voice, said, 'Imagine if the party knew your father's deals were handled by that man. Imagine if the committee knew you knew.' Then he hung up." "Has he called since?" "Once. Yesterday. He said there'd be instructions. Then hung up again." "Have you informed the police?" "No." "Why not?" She hesitated. "My family," she said at last, "isn't what it was. We don't survive scandals anymore." Wolfe leaned back. "You presume the scandal lies in the association with Mr. Trask?" Yes. No drugs? No misappropriation? No murder? Nothing like that. Your father died of a stroke, did he not?" "Yes." "Convenient." Her mouth hardened. Wolfe's eyes glinted. "Madam, you asked for my services. I shall not flatter you. If you are withholding the nature of the relationship between you and Trask, or between him and your father, I shall uncover it in due course." She straightened. "There is nothing improper, nothing unspeakable." I watched her say it. She meant most of it, but not all. Wolfe said nothing for a moment. Then, "I detest blackmail. It is a crime that assumes cowardice in its prey. I am no coward." He set the orchid schedule aside. What do you offer in compensation? I have money. He waved that off. No, I have money. Offer me something I cannot buy. She hesitated. I have one of the original Trask campaign ledgers. My father kept it. I think it's a copy Trask wanted destroyed. Wolfe blinked. Not a transcript. No. Ink. Paper. Handwriting. Notes. Foolish man. Wolfe murmured. He glanced at me. Archie, call Saul. And Fred. I want a watch on Miss Temple's residence, and one on the late Mr. Trask's known haunts. I stood. What address? I asked. Lafayette Street, 1126, apartment 4B. Does anyone else know you've come here? Wolfe asked. No. I took a cab. Did the cabman see your envelope? No. Did you bring the ledger? No. I thought it too dangerous. Where is it? She paused. In a locker, at the main library. Wolfe looked pleased. A rare sight. You are not wholly foolish. She smiled faintly. I want this done quietly, she said. No police. No press. No blood. That last one, Wolfe said, is up to the blackmailer. She sat still, poised. Her gloved hand returned to her lap. Do you believe me? She asked. No, Wolfe said. But I do believe you're frightened, and frightened women are most instructive. He rose and slowly, and walked toward the globe to pour himself a beer. The chair creaked behind him. I shall consider myself retained, he said. I stepped forward. I'll need the key to that locker, I said. She fished it from her handbag. It was worn brass, numbered 8111. Do not speak of this again, Wolfe said, until I say otherwise. That includes mothers, lovers, and grocers. I don't talk to grocers, she said. Wolfe allowed a grunt of approval. He turned his back and waved her out. I escorted her to the door. She paused on the stoop. Mr. Goodwin, she said, do you think he likes me? No, I replied, but he thinks you're a puzzle. That's better. She descended the steps, with more calm than she'd arrived. The rain had softened. The street lamps burned steady. I stood for a moment beneath the awning before turning back inside. Fritz met me in the hall. He raised an eyebrow. Will he want lunch late? No. He's found a scandal. Appetite's back. I returned to the office. Wolfe had already reclaimed his chair. Get me Mr. Kramer, he said. Oh? We may need his cooperation before we provoke his fury. I crossed to the phone. Outside, Manhattan oozed into twilight, and inside, Wolfe had finally decided that this blonde's troubles, however trumped up, were worth lifting his considerable mass from a page of orchids. That meant, as usual, someone was already lying, and someone else was going to bleed for it. I arrived at Vivian Temple's building on Lafayette a little after 10. The doorman had one of those bristled moustaches and a professional sort of wariness. I gave him a smile that usually smoothed introductions. This time it didn't stick. Miss Temple, I said. Is she in? He looked me up and down. She left, not long ago. Alone, he hesitated. No, sir. A gentleman. Grey fedora, light topcoat. He held her elbow. Did she seem all right? He frowned. No, sir. She looked pale, as if she hadn't slept. That was enough to tighten the knot behind my ribs. I thanked him and took the elevator up to the 4th floor. Her name wasn't on the bell, just the number, 4B. I knocked. No answer. A second knock echoed against the hallway wallpaper. Still nothing. Listened. No footsteps, no creak of wood, no distant phonograph. I tried the knob. It gave. The door opened 2 inches with a hesitant groan. That wasn't like her. Vivian Temple didn't strike me as the kind of woman who left her front door unlatched in Manhattan. I stepped in slowly, my hand brushing the inside pocket of my coat. The room smelled faintly of iris powder and scorched toast. Sunlight bled through the curtains, filtered pale and diluted by the rain still misting outside. The apartment was tidy, almost compulsively so. Ivory walls, polished walnut, a chair, tucked just a little too precisely. On a corner table stood a mirror, or what was left of one. The glass was fractured, shattered inward. Jagged pieces clung to the frame like broken teeth. Beside it, the photograph, or part of it. The edges were curled, the center torn. A smear of fingerprint marked the lower corner. It had been ripped from the back. I crouched beside it. A tiny curl of paper, the size of a fingernail, had slipped under the baseboard. I coaxed it out with a matchstick. A bit of handwriting. Ink. Blue. No full word. Just half a curl of a J. It might have been Julian. Or nothing. On the far wall, the phone hung its receiver like a limp ear. I walked over and checked for a notepad nearby. Nothing. Not even a number scribbled in haste. In the bedroom, her bed was made. Sheets sharp. Corners folded military tight. But the pillow had an indentation. Not deep, just enough to say she'd sat there, or cried there, for a while. Her handbag was gone. No coat on the hook. One cigarette stubbed in the tray. A lipstick smear I recognized from yesterday. The bathroom was spotless. A single towel hanging. Mirror fogged faintly at the edges. I returned to the living room and tried the windows. Locked from the inside. Whatever had happened, she hadn't left in panic. But the broken mirror, the torn photo, and the open door didn't add up. Unless she'd been rushed or persuaded. I stepped back into the hallway and headed down to the lobby. The doorman was at attention. "Describe the man," I said. He narrowed his eyes. White, 40-ish, trim mustache, grey fedora, carried an umbrella, looked like a banker. Did he give a name? "No, sir." "What kind of car?" "No car." They walked. "Direction?" "East." I gave him my card. "If she returns or calls, let me know." "I will." Outside, the rain had become a drizzle again. Lazy, half-hearted. I walked to the corner and found a phone booth, dropped a nickel and dialed Wolfe's number. He answered on the second ring. Orchid time must have been postponed. "She's gone," I said. "Explain." Apartment door ajar, mirror smashed, photograph ripped, back half missing. No sign of her. "Doorman says she left with a man in a grey hat," Wolfe grunted. "What else?" Room was clean, bed made, but she didn't leave like she planned a lunch date. She left like someone persuaded her, or scared her. "You have the photograph, half of it. Return with it." "And Archie?" "Yes." "Use care. If the bait vanishes, the trap becomes meaningless." I hung up. The phone clicked softly. I pocketed the torn photo and stepped back into the street. Fog was curling off the pavement like pipe smoke, and somewhere in the city, Vivian Temple had either gone willingly, or someone had taken her someplace she wouldn't want to stay long. The cab back to the brownstone was slow. Manhattan had decided to wet its collar and sulk. Streetcars hissed like wounded cats. Horns bled frustration into the mist. When I reached home, Fritz opened the door only because I'd rung 3 times and identified myself through the speaking box. Inside, the brownstone was its usual warm, rigid self. The lamps were lit, the rugs precise, the quiet, dignified. Wolfe was waiting in the office. I stepped in and handed him the remains of the photograph. He took it with a delicacy that would have done justice to a venomous leaf. "Describe the fracture," he said. "Mirror on a stand. Frame wood. Glass shattered from one point, like it was struck with something heavy." "Was it?" "No. No object nearby. Looked deliberate. Or staged." He frowned. "This," he said, lifting the torn photo, "was attached to something." "The back," I said. "Ripped off, but only the backing, not the photo itself." "No." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "The back contained handwriting," he said. "A note, or an address. That was the purpose." I found a fragment under the baseboard. Ink. One curve of a letter. Could be a J. He nodded. "Julian Trask," he said. "Likely. Or someone using his name. Doorman says she left with a man in a grey fedora." "Describe him." Doorman said. "White male, about 40, mustache, grey hat, umbrella, no car." "Where did they go?" "East." Wolfe leaned back. "She would not go willingly," he said. "Not with a stranger. Unless frightened." I nodded. "She had that look yesterday," I said. "Like she was expecting someone to follow her. Then she was warned. Or delivered." He set the photo down. "Saul is watching Trask's address. Already on it. Fred? Covering her building, just in case." "Good." Fritz entered with coffee and a thin slice of cherry tart. Wolfe ignored the tart. That was serious. He reached for the phone. "Whom are you calling?" I asked. "Kramer." "That soon?" He nodded. "If Miss Temple is harmed, I would rather not discover it through headlines." He dialed. I poured myself coffee and waited. "Kramer," Wolfe said. "I require a kindness." "No. No sarcasm. A woman named Vivian Temple has disappeared." "Yes. Daughter of Councilman Temple." Last seen with a man matching the description I shall have Archie send you. He listened. No, not that sort of client. The sort who carries leverage, not cash. A pause. If she's alive, find her. If she's dead, tell me first. He hung up. I sipped my coffee. Well? I asked. He grunted twice. Wolfe said, That's a promise and a warning. I nodded. Should we prepare for a body? No, he said quietly. Prepare for a demand. We sat in silence for a long minute. Wolfe shifted. Archie, begin compiling notes on Julian Trask. Cross-reference. With Councilman Temple's last 3 campaigns, look for unexplained expenditures. Travel overlaps, any photographs leaked, then retracted. I stood. On it. I moved toward the hall. As I reached the door, Wolfe added without looking. She didn't hire me to find a missing photograph. I paused. No? She hired me, he said, to protect something she hadn't told me about yet. I waited. She was going to give it to me tomorrow, he said. Tonight, someone found her first. I left him to the orchids and the flickering shadows of Manhattan. In the back of my mind, the image of Vivian Temple's calm voice echoed against a broken mirror and a torn photo and a grey hat that might have covered a very familiar head. The rain had lessened, but not by much. It tapped at the windows like a visitor with poor timing. Inside the brownstone, the air was thicker than usual, not with cigar smoke, but with Wolfe's silence. That was worse. I climbed the stairs to the plant rooms without announcing myself, which was usually enough to get me exiled from dinner. But this wasn't a day for orchids, or manners. Wolfe stood in the center of the far room, arms crossed like a skeptical statue. He wasn't holding a trowel, or his mister. That, alone, was a sign of calamity. The orchids, those precious, babied, molly-coddled blooms, had been left to mind themselves. He didn't turn as I approached. She's gone, I said. He didn't answer. Apartment door was open, mirror broken, photograph ripped. Doorman says she left with a man in a grey fedora. Still nothing. His gaze stayed fixed on a Vanda Coerulea, which looked as innocent as any flower could. I've brought the photograph, I added. That got him. He turned, his face unreadable. Where? Office. Go. He said it without malice, just a single syllable laced with control. I turned and made my way down. In the dining room, Fritz was setting the table. His hands were more precise than usual. That meant he'd heard enough to worry. He glanced up. Lunch? He asked. Soon. With tension. He inclined his head. The trout soufflé will not improve with worry. I moved past him into the office. Placed the torn photo halves in a single manila envelope on Wolfe's desk. Then I waited. A full minute passed before I heard him descend. Not heavily, just slow, deliberate. He entered, nodded at Fritz, who disappeared, and crossed to his desk. He sat, opened the envelope, and pulled out the fragments. With tweezers, he laid them flat and studied the edges. This is not an act of panic, he said. No, it's a message. Yes. He reached for his beer glass, already poured, by Fritz, and took a long sip. She has either been taken or has fled. I nodded. I'd guess the first. He tapped a fingernail against the photo's torn edge. It clicked like a metronome. The man in the fedora, unknown. The doorman said mid-40s, mustache, well-dressed. No car. Wolfe exhaled through his nose. Archie, do you know why I detest blackmail? Because it interrupts meals. No, because it degrades logic. That was Wolfe for you. A girl vanishes, and he grieves for logic. Someone wanted the back of this photo, I said. It had handwriting. Maybe an address. I know. You think she knew what was written there? Of course. She brought it to us. And you think she was going to tell us? Wolfe didn't reply immediately. He folded his arms. She was going to use it. As leverage. To trade for what? He looked at me. Protection. Legitimacy. She intended to barter truth, just not all of it. I leaned against the cabinet. She's a client. Yes. Then we look. Yes. But where? He stood. For now, the orchids will wilt. He crossed the room. His bulk made the chair groan as he turned toward the map on the north. Wall. Begin with the man in the hat. I pulled out my notebook. Grey fedora. Mustache. No car. Left with her heading east on foot. That direction leads toward Cooper Square, or Lower Broadway, or any number of bad decisions. Precisely. Wolfe reached for the phone. He dialed. Saul, he said. Locate a man in a grey fedora, 40-ish, mustache, east of Lafayette, walking with a blonde woman, early 30s. This morning. Check cab stands, corner boys, newspaper vendors. He paused. Yes, that's all. He hung up. He'll find him, Wolfe said. Eventually, I replied. In the meantime, you'll visit Trask's known residences. That's 4 addresses. Begin with the one furthest south. Why? Because if Miss Temple is dead, the answer will be there. If she's alive, it won't. I gave him a look. He didn't blink. You want her dead? No. But that's where fear would go to hide the body. Fritz reappeared in the doorway. Lunch? Wolfe exhaled. Yes. We sat. The trout soufflé was impeccable. I barely tasted it. Wolfe chewed methodically, his thoughts louder than the cutlery. After 2 bites, he set his fork down. This was not random, he said. Agreed. She feared Trask, or whoever holds his debts, but she didn't fear them enough to stay silent. No, she came to me with intent. She wanted help. No, she wanted control. That gave me pause. She was using us? No, she was positioning us. He sipped his beer. She gave us a piece. Enough to lure, not enough to arm. So the photo was bait. And she? Gone. Either in hiding or under pressure. I pushed my plate aside. I'll start. With Trask's Soho apartment. Wolfe nodded. Take the revolver. That's serious. Yes. I stood. Wolfe looked at me. She may have lied, but she believed someone wanted her silenced. And now, she may be. I crossed the room. At the door, Wolfe spoke again. Archie? Yes? Do not be brave. I gave a nod. I never am, I said, and left. The brownstone closed, behind me like a vault. Outside, the rain had slowed, but Manhattan wasn't breathing easy. It was waiting. It was nearly 2 o'clock when the doorbell rang. Not a buzz, not a knock. A firm, 2-count press, followed by silence. I met Fritz in the hallway. He didn't ask. He just looked at me the way a man looks at a teacup falling in slow motion. I opened the front door. Inspector Kramer stood there, coat soaked, hat tilted, eyes like flint. I stepped aside. He didn't. Thank me. He walked in, uninvited, as only he could do without offending Wolfe's rules. I closed the door behind him. Office? He asked. Yes. He wiped his feet on the mat, like it owed him money. I led him down the hall. Wolfe was at his desk, arms crossed. The yellow chair looked especially imperial today. Kramer didn't wait. She's dead. Wolfe didn't flinch. In Riverside Park, Kramer continued. Under the footbridge. Purse clutched tight. No bruises, no marks. Face calm. Dead for 4 hours. Wolfe breathed out through his nose. Miss Temple, he said. Confirmed? Yes. He walked across the room and sat in the red chair nearest the window. The one that squeaked. She had a photograph, Kramer added, folded inside her purse. Same one you asked about. We found it. Wolfe gestured faintly. Do you believe I killed her, Inspector? Kramer snorted. No, but I believe you know why someone else did. Wolfe didn't blink. Kramer leaned forward. She walked in here. You didn't report it. She was not a suspect, Wolfe said. She is now. Wolfe turned slightly toward me. Archie. I nodded. She came yesterday morning. Claimed she was being blackmailed over an old photo of her with Julian Trask. Kramer muttered something low. She said there had been no affair, just a political appearance. Wolfe continued. She brought a photograph. Half. The other half was torn away at her apartment this morning, where you found no sign of struggle, Kramer said. Yes. Wolfe shifted in his chair. She left her apartment with a man. Grey fedora, mustache, no vehicle. Headed east. We have no witnesses, Kramer said. You will, Wolfe replied. Kramer bristled. Don't get cute. Inspector, Wolfe said. When I get cute, you will need a thesaurus. I crossed to the desk and opened my notebook. We've already called Saul, I said. Fred too. She vanished sometime after 9:30. We estimate death between 10 and 11. Kramer rubbed his jaw. We found no signs of injection. No pills. Her coat was clean. Her gloves were dry. So? I asked. So, he said. She died standing up, or sitting. No struggle. No collapse. Just stillness. Wolfe raised a brow. A professional? He asked. No, Kramer said. Too clean. Too smooth. It smells like a warning. Then it is, Wolfe said. I closed my notebook. Kramer glanced at me. Any other visitors? He asked. No. Any. Enemies? Does Manhattan count? He didn't laugh. Kramer stood, walked once to the fireplace and back. His shoulders looked heavier than usual. She called no one, he said. No calls from her apartment after midnight. She expected to bring us more, Wolfe said. What? A ledger. Original notes from Trask's early campaigns. Her father kept them. She said they were in a locker. Where? New. York Public Library. Checked? No key. No locker number. It's gone. Kramer scratched at his scalp. If this was about Trask, that ledger is the motive. Unless it was personal, Wolfe said. Kramer looked sharply at him. Personal. How? Wolfe didn't answer. Kramer sat again. I don't like this, he said. Nor do I, Wolfe replied. No prints on the purse. Just hers. No paper. Just the photograph. Folded twice. No blood. Wolfe glanced at me. She brought that photo to bait someone, I said. She didn't expect to die. She miscalculated, Wolfe said. Kramer stood. I'm telling you this because I'd rather not clean up after your meddling. If you get wind of Trask, if he's in the city, I want him. You shall have him, Wolfe said. If I find him. Kramer narrowed his eyes. Don't play games. Wolfe sipped his beer. I never do. Right. Kramer walked to the door. He stopped. One more thing. Yes? There's a cabbie on 7th who swears he saw her. This morning. Alone. Southbound. Time? 9:15. She died before 11, I said, which means someone met her after that cab ride and killed her. Wolfe nodded once. I assume you've posted guards on Trask's. Known addresses? Already done. And? Nothing. He opened the door. Keep it that way, he said, and left. I waited. Wolfe tapped a finger against the edge of the photograph again. She was going to give us something, I said. She did, Wolfe murmured. What? She gave us a corpse and a timetable. I crossed to the window. Outside, the fog had thickened. Cars moved like ghosts. Manhattan hadn't noticed another dead girl in its veins, but Wolfe had, and that meant someone was about to notice Wolfe. Hard. The house on West End Avenue didn't. Whisper Wealth. It announced it. Brownstone facade. Brass fixtures. A mailbox with no name. Just the serifed initial T etched in the iron like a grudge. I rang once. The maid who answered was polished, trim, and offered just enough courtesy to make it clear that warmth was not part of the afternoon. She's expecting me, I said. Mr. Goodwin. That's the rumour. She let me in. The parlour was dim, thick with quiet money and heavy velvet drapes. The air smelled faintly of lavender, leather, and something old that hadn't been aired out in years. Evelyn Merritt was already seated, a high-back chair, wine in hand, silk blouse, 3 rings, and an expression like a courtroom judge who already knew how the jury would vote. Mr. Goodwin, she said. Mrs. Merritt, you work for Nero Wolfe. I nodded. She took a slow sip and placed the glass on a side table. If you're here, she said, it's about Vivian. Correct. She crossed her legs. I won't pretend I'm surprised she's dead. Most people are. Not when they knew her, or knew my husband. I took a seat across from her. The red upholstery scratched my wrist. She liked discomfort in others. That was clear. You know she came to us? I asked. She'd have to. She couldn't trust anyone else, not after what happened with Julian. Julian Trask. Her eyes flicked once. Not fear, just calculation. My husband's campaign fixer. You know what that means? I do. Then you know he handled the parts of politics that didn't get written into memoirs. Did your husband know? Of course he did. And approve? He didn't object. That's approval in politics. I leaned back slightly. You said you're not surprised she's dead. She was playing with things above her station. Again. She waved a hand. She was her father's daughter. Beautiful. Reckless. Convinced the rules didn't apply. Was she involved with Trask? I don't know. I never asked. But something shifted. Years ago. Raymond. Started locking drawers, whispering on the phone. And Vivian. She stopped coming by the house. That landed. She hadn't said wasn't invited. She said stopped coming. Did she tell you what she'd found? She told me nothing, Evelyn said coldly. But I watched her eyes, and I knew. She had something, and she thought it would restore her father's legacy, as if any of it could be cleaned. I reached into my coat and unfolded the torn photo. I laid it on the table between us. She stared at it. Her lip tightened. Where did you get that? Her apartment. She didn't touch it, but her hands curled in her lap. She never showed it to me, she said, but I saw it once, 3 years ago. It was on her desk. I recognized Trask instantly. That jaw, that smirk. He was poison with cufflinks. Did she say who took it? No. But you know. Yes. Silence settled in like dust. Well? I asked. She leaned forward. That photo wasn't taken in public. Look at the background. That's not a campaign event. That's a private room. White plaster cornices. That's the old Bishop Hotel, East 53rd. They had a private mezzanine for quiet meetings or quiet scandals. Who would have had access? Trask, obviously, and his people. She looked at me. Sharp, calculated. There was a man. Quiet, unassuming. Always 5 steps behind. Lester Broom. The name's new. He handled arrangements, travel, press, security. Never seen, never heard. But he saw everything. And he took photos. You're certain? I'm old enough to know the smell of guilt. It hung around him like cheap cologne. I pocketed the photo again. Do you think he's involved now? Only if he still works for someone who wants Trask buried or resurrected. I stood. Thank you for your time. She didn't move. As I turned, she said, Tell Mr. Wolfe, this isn't about blackmail, not anymore. This is war between men who used to share cigars over the Hudson and now want to burn each other alive. I turned back. Would your husband be one of them? She smiled. My husband is dead, but his enemies, they still write laws. Back on the sidewalk, I buttoned my coat. The rain had picked up again, this time with that sleet-like edge Manhattan used to keep you moving. I flagged a cab and climbed in. West 35th, I said. Near 9th. The driver grunted and swung into traffic. Wolfe was reading in the office when I returned. Same chair, same immovable expression. Fritz handed me a towel before I spoke a word. I dried my hair and stepped into the office. She knew who took the photo, I said. Name, Lester Broom. Wolfe didn't blink. Alive? Yes. Employed? Unknown. He set the book aside. Speak. I gave him the entire visit. The wine, the parlour, the old hotel on East 53rd, the accusation that this was no longer about a woman's reputation, but about political bodies buried under campaign slogans. He nodded once. She's correct, he said. This was never about scandal. It was leverage. I placed the photo back on the desk. She confirmed it was Trask, recognized the room, called it private, called Broom the man behind the scenes. Then Broom took the photo, or knows who did. Wolfe leaned forward, fingers steepled. Archie, describe Evelyn Merritt. Bitter, controlled, regal. The kind of woman who can tell you a corpse deserves it and make you feel like agreeing. She has nothing to gain from deceit. No. He stood, slowly, and walked to the globe. He spun it once, gently, like a man testing the weight of the world. She said something else, I added. Called this war between men who used to smoke cigars together and now want each other dead. Wolfe grunted. Trask's enemies, he murmured. She said, they still write laws. Wolfe turned back. Find Broom. Where do I start? Begin with the Bishop Hotel. Trace its former guest logs. Check who rented suites during Trask's final campaign. I nodded. Wolfe returned to his chair. And Archie, he said, settling in. We are no longer investigating a scandal. No, we are navigating a battlefield. Fritz appeared in the doorway. Would you like dinner, sir? Wolfe's lips curled. Only if there is trout. There is. Then yes. I turned to go. Archie. Yes. Did she mourn her husband? Not. For a minute. Then we must mourn him ourselves. A man who let a fixer bury him, and a daughter try to dig him out. He waved me off. Outside, the rain still fell. Inside, we had a name, a location, and something new. Motive, wrapped in ambition, which meant the next knock might come from someone who didn't want the truth uncovered, but rather erased. The studio was tucked into a narrow slice of East Houston, wedged between a pawnshop and a tailor's window filled with dusty mannequins. The door bore the name G. Morgan, photography in gold script, that had long since faded into resignation. I knocked once, waited, then knocked again. This time, a shuffling sound inside answered before the man himself did. Gil Morgan cracked the door, poked his head out, blinked twice and said, "You a cop?" "Not today," I replied. "I'm Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe." That earned me a blink and a tug of the door chain. "Is it about—" He didn't finish. "It is," I said. "Can I come in?" He hesitated, then unhooked the chain and opened the door. The place smelled like fixer and mildew. Narrow room, stripped down equipment, filing cabinets that hadn't been filed in years. He gestured to a chair near a battered desk and sat opposite. Me, fingers fidgeting. Gil Morgan looked like a man who never quite recovered from developing other people's secrets. Early 40s, wire rim glasses, shirt with one frayed collar and ink smudges on his cuffs. Nervous, but not guilty. At least, not in the ways that mattered yet. "You worked for Raymond Temple," I began. He nodded. "During the second campaign. Publicity shots, events, nothing fancy. You knew Julian Trask?" "Only by reputation." He never smiled. "Miss Temple hired you?" "Once," he said. "Just once. To find a specific negative from a contact sheet I'd saved." "From which event?" He swallowed. "A hotel function. Bishop Hotel. Private mezzanine shoot. I had a role from that night. And I kept it, against protocol, but I thought it might be valuable." "For blackmail?" "No, for truth. That came out fast. Too fast." "Where is it?" He looked down. "Gone." "Gone where?" "I had it. In a flat archive. Sleeve. I reviewed the negatives last year. Then, 6 weeks ago, it disappeared." "Stolen?" "I can't prove that. But I had an assistant at the time. Loretta Klein. She knew my system. Could have taken it. She left." He nodded. "Quit. Just before Christmas. Said she was tired of chemical burns and wanted to photograph pets." "Did she take anything else?" "No. Just the role." "You're sure?" "Yes." I leaned forward. "Why didn't you report this?" He stared at the edge of the table. "Because the role showed something. Someone. I don't even know who. But Trask was in 3 frames. Vivian in 2, and a third man. Never identified. He was older, in robes, looked judicial. Judge. I think so. And you never asked?" He shook his head. "I didn't want to know." "That's your problem," I said. "You already do." He wiped his hands on his trousers. "Vivian came to see you?" "Yes. 3 weeks ago. She said she thought Trask had found out about the negatives. Asked if I still had them. I said, no. Why lie? I didn't know who she was working with. I thought, maybe she'd bring trouble. She brought more than that," I said. His eyes lifted. "She's dead, Gil." He didn't speak, just sank into himself, a man peeling back his own regret. "She was found in Riverside," I continued, "under the footbridge. A photograph. In her purse. Half torn. No blood. No struggle." He stared at the floor. "I thought she was bluffing," he said softly. "I thought she just wanted to stir the pot." "You knew she was scared." He nodded. "I told her the role was gone. She didn't believe me. Would she have gone to Klein? Probably. Would Klein have given it up?" He hesitated. "Loretta was sharp. Cold. She didn't like Vivian. Said she was the kind of woman who thought men existed to be her mirrors." "She say why?" "No." I leaned forward. "If she still has the role, she's a target." He paled. "You think—" "I think someone already killed for less. If they know Loretta has it, she's next." He looked down again. I didn't mean for this." "You didn't stop it either." He swallowed. "What do I do?" "Stay put. Lock your doors. Don't talk to anyone but me or the police. Understand?" He nodded. "Do you have any prints from the roll?" "No. I never developed them. Just examined the negatives on the light box." I stood. "Give me Klein's last known address." He scribbled it down on a slip of thin paper. "Brooklyn. Crown Heights. She rented a room above a butcher." I folded the paper and tucked it in my pocket. "She might not be there now," he added. "She moved quiet." "Most smart people do," I said. I stepped to the door. He followed. "You really think I'm next?" "I think you're breathing." "That's good. Let's keep it that way." Outside, the street had gone dark under the rain clouds. The lamplight glowed amber in puddles, and I had a new name in my pocket. Gil Morgan wasn't a villain, just a man who thought secrets were harmless. until someone came along and paid the price for them. I didn't like the look on his face as I left. It was the look of a man who just realized his own story might be ending early. Back in the cab, I gave the driver the Brooklyn address and sat in silence. Wolfe wouldn't be pleased, but he would be interested. We had the role, or part of it. We had a girl who vanished, another who died, and a third who might not know she's next. And we had a judge in a photograph, standing too close to a fixer, with a woman who didn't survive the week. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the look on Vivian Temple's face in Wolfe's office. It wasn't fear, it was calculation, which meant somewhere, buried in that missing film, was something more than a scandal. Something permanent. Something someone would kill again to keep sealed in silver nitrate. It was a bad sign when Fred Durkin called. It was worse when he didn't say much. "Archie," he said. "Gil Morgan's dead. Basement studio. You'll want to see it." No. Wasted breath. That meant Fred had already seen something that didn't fit. I was halfway out the door before Wolfe's beer glass had settled. By the time I got to East Houston, the police had already cordoned off the block. Blue uniforms idled in the drizzle, boots wet and gloves grey. The stairwell to Morgan's basement. Studio was lit by a single hanging bulb, flickering, yellow. I showed my license and ducked under the tape. Fred met me at the door. Trench coat, broad face, hands in his pockets. "He's in the darkroom," he said. "Dead how?" "Strangled. Clean. Cord. Probably a shoelace." I nodded. "What did they say?" "Burglary. Places tossed. Drawers open. Film canisters all over. But nothing else taken. No cash missing. Typewriter still here. Even his camera bag's untouched. Any sign of forced entry? None. Door was locked from the outside. Bolt wasn't thrown. Back entrance? Chained. From the inside. Fred led me through the main room. Still smelled like fixer. The place was dim, every surface cluttered. In the rear, behind the accordion door, was the dark room. The red bulb above us cast the room in blood. The body lay on the floor near the sink, face down, arms slightly out. No struggle. No marks on the walls or furniture. Just Gil, neatly strangled. As if someone had walked in, killed him, and left before the silence could protest. "He had company," I said. "Yep." I scanned the trays. Developer. Stop. Fix. A single wet print curled under the tongs. Who found him? Building superintendent. Said the lights had been left on since the morning. Thought the chemicals might catch. Time of death? Medical guy says between noon and 1. Fred walked to the enlarger and crouched. Here's where it gets interesting. He lifted the lid from the tray beneath the enlarger head. Nestled beneath a blotter, wedged flat between two sheets of glass, was a second photograph. This was hidden, he said. I took it gently. Black and white. Clean edges. Slight curl. Vivian Temple. Mid-turn. Hair-pinned. Gaze soft. And beside her, half-shadowed, stood a man in judicial robes. Older. Stern. Clean-shaven. The kind of face you find on commemorative plaques. His eyes were turned away, but his hand, resting lightly on her shoulder, was unmistakable. "You recognize him?" Fred asked. "No." I handed him the photo and stepped back. "He printed this today?" "Looks like it. The trays are fresh." I exhaled. Then someone came for it, found him with it, and made sure he didn't print another. Fred nodded. "The cops won't find motive," I said. "They'll find dust. Maybe a half-print. Maybe a cigarette stub. But the killer didn't come to steal. He came to erase," Fred said. I looked at Morgan's hands. No bruising, no defense wounds, still ink-stained. He trusted whoever it was. Enough to turn his back. I walked back into the main room. Shelves had been ransacked. Film cans opened. But it was the chaos of purpose, not panic. The killer had been searching for something, or making it look that way. "Anything else?" I asked. Fred gestured to a drawer near the enlarger. "There's a page missing from his negatives log." "Just one?" "Yes." I thought of Vivian Temple, and the curve of her voice when she said this has to be quiet. "This wasn't a burglary," I said. Fred snorted. "No kidding. I need to get this to Wolfe." He held up the photo. "I'm coming with you." We left the scene, pushing past the same officer who'd offered a shrug and a coffee cup as crime scene wisdom. Gil Morgan had developed his last role, and someone had decided that was one too many. Back at the brownstone, Fritz opened the door. Before I reached the second ring, he didn't ask. just nodded and stepped aside. Wolfe was in the office, seated, yellow chair turned slightly toward the fire. His lips moved soundlessly, either dictating thoughts or rehearsing curses. Fred and I entered. I closed the door behind us. "Well?" Wolfe asked. Fred handed him the photo. He examined it in silence, then leaned forward and placed it gently on the blotter. "Describe the scene," he said. I did. Every detail. The strangulation, the trays, the missing ledger page, the locked door. Wolfe poured himself a glass of beer, didn't sip it. "I presume the police are calling it a burglary," he said. "Correct. And that nothing valuable was taken?" "Correct." He tapped the photo. "This man, unknown," I said. "But I'd wager a judge." "More than a wager," Wolfe muttered. "Those robes are ceremonial. Southern Circuit, federal bench." Fred blinked. "You know him?" "Not yet. But his face will appear in at least 3 legal publications and 1 Vanity Fair profile. We'll find him." Wolfe tapped the edge of the glass. "Morgan printed this today." Chemicals were fresh. Only 1 other print in the tray. "Which?" "A building corner. Empty." He waved it off. "This was the only target," he said, nodding at the print. Fred moved to the red chair. "Whoever killed him didn't panic," he said. "They knew where to find the photo. They knew his routine." Wolfe nodded slowly. "Which means either Loretta Klein told someone about the role, or someone followed Vivian Temple long before she came to us." I leaned against the cabinet. "We still don't know what's on the missing page," I said, "or why Morgan kept it in the log." "Because he intended to sell it," Wolfe said. I raised an eyebrow. "Not for money," he clarified. "For protection. Knowledge is a currency." He kept his coin minted and filed. Fred leaned forward. "If that man's a federal judge, then someone is cleaning house," Wolfe said. He stood, slowly, and walked to the globe. Spun it once. The ledger, the photograph, the missing girl, the fixer, all connected. Then, "Why kill now?" I asked. Wolfe turned. "Because someone saw the end coming." Fred nodded. "Who do we tell?" "No one," Wolfe said. "Not yet." I crossed to the desk and sat. "He's not going to be the last," I said. "No," Wolfe replied. "But he was the first to think secrets were safer in the dark." He reached for the photo again. He was wrong. I looked out the window. Manhattan had gone grey again, the kind of light that never dried anything. A city built on shadows, flickering between law and ambition. And somewhere out there, a man in robes had once posed with a blonde girl and a fixer with a reputation. And now, that memory had developed into motive, and someone had already trimmed the negative. The office was already set when the first knock came. Wolfe had insisted on all 3 red chairs, precisely arranged, 1 at each cardinal point across from him. He remained in his yellow throne, arms folded like a judgment rendered. I opened the front door for Evelyn Merritt at 10 minutes past the hour. She stepped in without a word, wrapped in grey wool, gloves like steel. She didn't ask where we were, going. She already knew. "Mrs. Merritt," I said, "you'll be the first." That's rarely a compliment. I led her in. Wolfe didn't stand. He simply gestured to the red chair closest to the globe, the one that faced the orchids through the southern windows. She sat, crossed her legs slowly, removed 1 glove. "No pleasantries." "Thank you for coming," Wolfe said. "I came because you asked." He nodded. "You knew Judge Harmon Langdon?" Her chin lifted slightly. "He was a friend of my late husband." "In what capacity?" "He supported his policy initiatives." "Privately?" "Financially?" "No." "With contacts, endorsements, behind closed doors." "Did you ever meet him at the Bishop Hotel?" "I did." "Did your husband?" "Yes." "Did you?" Her eyes flicked once. "Yes." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Did you know he was the man in the photograph with your stepdaughter?" She hesitated. I suspected. "Why?" "His posture, the profile, and the gesture." "You saw the photo?" "I was shown it." "By whom?" She looked at me, then back at Wolfe. "Vivian." Wolfe's eyebrows lifted. "When?" "Last year, shortly after her father's death." "And your reaction?" "I told her to burn it." "Why?" "Because it would kill what little legacy he had left." "Your husband?" "No, hers." Wolfe nodded. "That was all. Thank you. You may wait in the front room." She stood, smoothed her coat, left without a word. I stepped out into the hall. Loretta Klein was already there, straight-backed, sharp-eyed, holding a notepad like a weapon. "Miss Klein," I said, "I'm here under protest." "Of course." She stepped in, took the center chair. Wolfe examined her. "You assisted Mr. Gil Morgan?" "Yes." "For how long?" 8 months. "And you departed voluntarily?" "Yes." "When?" 2 weeks before Christmas. "Did you know of a roll of film containing Mr. Trask, Miss Temple, and a third man?" "I saw the negatives once." "Did you take them?" "No." "You expect me to believe that?" "I don't care what you believe. Miss Temple died 3 days ago." "Yes." "Mr. Morgan yesterday." "I read the paper." "Did either of them contact you in the weeks prior?" She paused. "Vivian did." "When?" 10 days ago. She came to my apartment. Demanded I return the negatives." "And did you?" "No." "Because you didn't have them?" "Because I didn't want to." Wolfe leaned slightly forward. "Where are they now?" "Destroyed." He nodded once. "You are lying." She stiffened. "That's slander." "It is not. Mr. Morgan printed one of those negatives hours before his death." Her lips parted, then closed. "Why did you lie?" She looked at me now, less certain. "I thought if I admitted I had them, you'd blame me." "Miss Klein," Wolfe said, "blame is a weapon. I use knives." She looked away. "I left them with someone." "Who?" "A lawyer. To hold. In case. I vanished." "Name?" She paused. Wolfe waited. "Daniel Stokes." He nodded once. "That will do." I stepped to the door again. "Mr. Broom," I called. The final guest stepped in. Lester Broom. Political aide turned shadow man. Trim suit, slick hair, shoes too polished for honesty. Broom took the remaining red chair, the one nearest, the fireplace. He glanced once at the others, measured, careful. "Mr. Broom," Wolfe began, "you were employed by Raymond Temple's office from 1940 to 1946? "Yes." "Your duties included?" "Scheduling, press, security, some event coordination, photographic work, only logistics." "You knew Mr. Trask?" "Professionally." "Miss Temple?" "Barely." "Judge Langdon?" "No." "You're sure?" "Yes." Wolfe reached to his desk drawer and removed the photograph. The print. Vivian Temple and the man in robes. He slid it across the desk. Broom didn't touch it. "Do you recognize either individual?" He hesitated. "Her, yes. The man, no." "You're lying." Broom didn't move. "I'm not." "You arranged the Bishop Hotel gathering on May 12th, 1943. Miss Temple was escorted, Mr. Trask present. Judge Langdon invited." "I don't recall." Wolfe's tone cooled. "You don't recall because you burned the guest list." "You did. It to erase connections." Broom's jaw stiffened. "I had no reason." "You had every reason. Mr. Trask was under inquiry. Mr. Langdon, under scrutiny. Miss Temple had the negatives. And now, 2 of them are dead." Broom stood. "I won't sit here." "You will sit," Wolfe said. His voice cut the room clean. Broom sat. "You have ties to Daniel Stokes?" Broom blinked. "Yes." "He represented Temple's legal interests?" "Sometimes." "He holds negatives." Broom looked up. "That's not possible." "Oh, it is. Miss Klein gave them to him for safekeeping. Before she lied to me. Before Mr. Morgan died." Wolfe leaned forward. "Who paid you to retrieve them?" "I wasn't paid." "Then you're an idealist. And I dislike idealists." Silence stretched. Broom. "Look down. She said she wanted them protected. She said they'd be used to destroy people. Did you believe her?" "No." "But you took them." "Yes." "Where are they now?" "I mailed them." "Where?" "Anonymous drop. Post office box. I don't know who retrieves it." "That," Wolfe said, "is nonsense." "I'm telling the truth." "No," Wolfe replied calmly. "You're telling a story. One that spares your skin while fogging the trail." Broom sat back. Wolfe turned to me. "Archie." "Yes?" "Get Saul. I want Daniel Stokes located. Today. Quietly. On it." "Fred?" Fred stepped from the hallway. "Escort our guests. Out. One at a time." Fred nodded. Evelyn Merritt exited first, then Klein, then Broom. I closed the door. Wolfe sipped his beer. "Well?" I asked. He tapped each chair. Merritt lied least. Klein lied worst. Broom, most practiced. He stood. "This is no longer about guilt. It's about who thinks they can control a narrative, and who's willing to kill to protect it." "Exactly." He turned to the globe. "We need to Find the man behind that robe. And the man behind the camera. No, Wolfe said softly. He's dead. I nodded. One more thing, I said. Yes? Broom didn't sweat, but he never once looked at the photo. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. That, he said, is the most honest thing he did. It was just past 9 when Fritz knocked on the office door. Wolfe was mid-sentence, dictating notes on Langdon's judicial history. I had the typewriter going and a pencil behind my ear. Fritz never interrupts unless he's certain something matters. Wolfe stopped speaking, looked up. Yes? I found something, Fritz said. In the kitchen. Wolfe frowned. Garbage. Fritz stepped in, holding a shallow metal tray. Inside lay a scorched envelope, half crumpled. The flap was blackened, but the front was legible, at least partly. Wolfe gestured, and I took it from Fritz. I angled the paper under the lamp. Written in hurried, slanted ink. V.T. Brownstone, 35th V.T., I said. Vivian Temple. Wolfe's brow twitched. I tilted it again. Below the name, faint but clear, were the remnants of a return mark. The tail end of a signature. Rounded letters. Familiar ones. Gil Morgan, I said. Wolfe reached for the envelope. Where? He asked Fritz. Wastebasket beneath the pantry counter, folded inside a used paper bag. You were cleaning? I was sorting the compostable from the rest. Wolfe exhaled. You found this before Archie, he said. Fritz gave a rare smile. I sort more precisely. Wolfe waved him off. Fritz bowed and left. I sat, unfolding the envelope as far as it would allow. The paper cracked softly under pressure. Why burn it? I said. Wolfe's gaze dropped. Someone wanted it gone, but not seen burning. They used the kitchen, which limits the suspects. I nodded. Broom. Klein. Merritt. Unlikely, Wolfe said. Too clean. Too careful. He looked at the envelope again. This was written quickly, not for record keeping, for delivery. Hand delivery? He nodded. Gil Morgan sent this, intended for Vivian, but she never received it, because it never left the house, or because it arrived after her death. I stood. This came in through the front. Fritz didn't open the door. Then someone entered with it, concealed. Broom? Possibly, or Klein, or someone neither of us has yet named. I crossed to the hall. I'll dust it for prints. Wolfe waved a hand. Pointless. Whoever burned it wore gloves, or wiped it. Then why leave the address intact? Wolfe's voice lowered. Because the killer underestimated the one habit more obsessive than mine. I looked at him. Fritz. Yes. I laid the tray gently on the windowsill. The scent of smoke still clung to it. Wolfe tapped the armrest. Twice. The message, he said, was never read. I nodded. Then what was it? A warning? Or a confession? Or a thread meant to tie this back to us? Then someone panicked. No, Wolfe murmured. Someone cleaned. He leaned forward and folded his hands. Archie. Construct the timeline. I pulled the notepad from my pocket. Vivian last seen. 9:30. Dead by 11. Morgan contacted her days prior. She knew about the negatives. Morgan told us he didn't give them to her, but he intended to, which means this envelope held either a key or a map. Both, Wolfe said, metaphorically. Do we tell Kramer? No, not yet. I tilted my head. We're holding back again. We are staying ahead. Kramer cannot help if we do not lead. I returned to the desk. There's another option, I said. Wolfe raised a brow. Loretta, Klein. She knew about the roll. Knew Morgan had printed something. Maybe he sent her a message instead. Addressed to Vivian? She lived here. He may not have known the danger she was in. Wolfe thought for a long moment. If Klein retrieved this and burned it, then she's hiding something, or protecting someone. I took the envelope and slid it gently into a new sleeve. Wolfe rang for Fritz. A moment later, the kitchen door creaked open. Yes, sir? Has Miss Klein handled anything in your presence? No, only her coat. Did she enter the kitchen? Yes, briefly, to ask for water. She placed her glass on the counter. Wolfe nodded. Save the glass. Already done. Fritz left. I looked at Wolfe. Well? He lifted the envelope, studied it one last time. Morgan tried to reach us, or Vivian, or both. He failed. And now he's dead, which means someone intercepted this and thought it had to burn. I leaned against the cabinet. You still think this is about the photo? Wolfe looked up, expression cool. No, he said. It's about what the photo unlocks, which is a man with power and robes and something to lose. He tapped the edge of the tray once more. And the next time someone underestimates Fritz, he said, we may not be so fortunate. It took me the better part of a morning to find her. 3 phone calls, 2 wrong turns, and a long walk past a row of kosher bakeries in Crown Heights. The apartment was on the 2nd floor of a dull red building above a locksmith. The buzzer didn't work, so I knocked. Loretta Klein opened the door halfway. Her hair was darker than I remembered. Dyed. The blouse was clean, but her eyes were rimmed with something that wasn't sleep. You shouldn't be here, she said. That makes 2 of us, I replied. But I am. Can I come in? She hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. The place was small, sparse. A couch that sagged, curtains too long for the window. A typewriter sat on the kitchen table, paper already rolled in. She'd been halfway through a sentence. Sit, she said, pointing. I took the chair by the radiator. She leaned against the counter, arms folded. I changed my name, she said. I noticed. I wanted it quiet. You've done quiet very well. She looked down. Gil's dead. Yes. Vivian too. Yes. She walked to the sink and poured a glass of water. Her hands trembled. I didn't kill them. I never said you did. I know how this works, she said. People start dying. The ones who knew them get questioned. Then people like you come around asking polite questions with impolite eyes. I gave her time. She set the glass down. He gave me the negatives, she said. Gil, right after Vivian came to see him. When? 2 weeks ago. Why? You. He didn't trust Vivian. Thought she'd already shared them with someone dangerous. Thought I'd be safer. Were you? No. I leaned forward. Did you look at the roll? She nodded. Judge Langdon. That was him. I didn't recognize him at first, but there's a shot. Full face, profile, side lit. No mistaking it. In the robe? No, in a grey suit. But there's one shot of him in the robe too, posed, beside Trask, with Vivian between them. What else? She hesitated. There were notes, not typed, inked, in Gil's hand. He kept records. That night, the Bishop Hotel was arranged for Langdon to meet someone, not Vivian. A fixer. Trask. Yes. Why would a federal judge need a fixer? She stepped away from the counter and sat on the armrest of the couch. Because he made a mistake. What kind? 10 years ago. Sentencing case, civil rights. Langdon took a bribe, buried testimony. The girl walked. I frowned. She? Black teenager. Harlem. Assault case. Langdon suppressed evidence that would have helped her. After that, Trask used it to keep Langdon in his pocket. And Vivian found this out. She didn't know the details. She thought it was an affair, or scandal, something personal. But it wasn't. No, it was federal corruption. She nodded. Trask kept Langdon close, in case he needed a ruling to disappear, or a warrant delayed. And the photo? A trophy. I sat back, folding my hands. You said Vivian came to Gil. Yes. She begged him to give her the role. Why? She said she could trade it. For what? She wouldn't say. Just that someone had offered to help her clear her father's name. But they wanted proof first. Proof of what? That Trask and Langdon weren't just players. They were puppeteers, pulling strings from inside the bench. I whistled. She had guts. She had desperation. I looked at her. Why not destroy the negatives? I tried. She met my eyes. I tried to burn them. I lit the match. But something stopped me. Vivian was dead. Gil was scared. I thought, maybe the truth should breathe for once. Do. You still have them? She stood, crossed the room. From a coat closet, she pulled a small lockbox. Steel, dent in the corner. She set it on the table, opened it with a tiny brass key, and removed a wax paper sleeve. Inside, 7 negatives, 2 contact prints. One of them the shot I'd already seen. But this one was clearer, better contrast. Vivian mid-turn, Langdon's hand on her shoulder. Trask in the background, blurred but unmistakable. She laid them out. There's more, she said. She pulled out a folded paper. Gil's notes. I recognized the looping cursive. Each entry dated, initialed, referenced a name, a room number, a time. One line stood out. Langdon, RM 307. Judge signed off. Todd confirmed. TR present. V witnessed. V, I said. Vivian? She came in at the end. Walked into something she didn't understand. And then someone made. Sure she wouldn't talk. Yes? Gil? He was printing that photo the day he died. He called me. Said he wanted to send it to Wolfe. Said he was done being afraid. I exhaled. Someone got to him first. She nodded. I gathered the negatives and slid them back into the sleeve. You're coming with me. No, you're not safe. I wasn't safe yesterday or last week, but I stayed alive. Barely. She looked at me, the kind of look that makes you pause before arguing. I'll stay here, she said, but I'll lock the doors. I'll call if anything changes. I hesitated, then handed her a number. Burnside 32970. That'll reach Wolfe. She took it, folded it twice, and tucked it in her blouse. I stood. Loretta. Yes? Why are you telling me this now? She looked out the window. Because I'm tired of waiting for someone else to die. The air outside was sharp. Brooklyn carried the smell of damp brick and faint coal smoke. I crossed the street without thinking, entered a phone booth, dialed. The brownstone. Wolfe answered on the second ring. She talked, I said. Langdon was dirty. Trask held the rope. Vivian stepped in it. You have proof. I have negatives. And notes. There was a pause. And Miss Klein. She's scared, but clear. Good. Bring it home. I hung up. The line went dead. But for the first time in days, something else felt alive. The truth. Developing. At last. The morning began with the kind of stillness that Wolfe preferred. No doorbells, no phones, no conversation. The orchids had just begun their daily misting under Theodore's devoted hand. I'd just come back, from a walk around the block, more for the air than for errands, when I found Theodore waiting at the top of the stairs. His face was tight. Mr. Goodwin, he said. Mr. Wolfe should see this. I followed him through the glass door into the plant rooms. The temperature shifted. Warm, fragrant, damp. Sunlight broke through the upper windows in long, dusty columns. Theodore led me to the north shelf, third row. He pointed, nestled between. A pot of Paphiopedilum bellatulum and a shallow stone tray of moss sat something out of place. A red leather glove, fine grain, clean stitching, wrist length, folded in on itself, as though placed, not dropped. I didn't touch it. I just stared. Did you move it? I asked. No. Anyone else in here this morning? No one. Anyone yesterday? He hesitated. Only. Miss Klein. Did you see her near the shelf? No. She didn't come past the second table. I watched. Are you sure? I am. I exhaled. Leave it, I said. Don't touch it. Not even to move it. He nodded and stepped. Back. I returned to the office. Wolfe was in his chair, breakfast tray cleared. He had his Gazette open, but his eyes weren't on the print. I presume, he said. Theodore has brought you something. I closed the door. He brought me to the orchids. Third shelf, north row. He looked up. Well? Red glove. Left hand. Women's. Not wet, not dusty. Wolfe set the paper down. Deliberate. Yes. He considered this. Do you recall who last wore red gloves? One. He waited. Evelyn Merritt, I said. He nodded once. She removed them. Before sitting? Yes. She retrieved them after? I believe so. But not both. Apparently. He drummed his fingers on the armrest. The placement suggests message, not accident. Agreed. I crossed to the cabinet, retrieved the photo sleeve, and laid it on his desk. She was closest to Langdon. She saw the photo, denied the robe, but not the man. Wolfe tapped the table. Miss Klein was in the house yesterday. Yes. She wore dark gloves, brown wool. Mrs. Merritt? Red leather, trimmed. He stood. That glove is a warning, or a mistake. No, he said. It is neither. I stepped back toward the desk. She placed it deliberately. Yes, Wolfe said, but not for us. Then for? Someone she expected to enter that room. Someone she knew would look. Theodore? No, me. I blinked. You? Yes. The orchid room is my sanctum. She assumed I would see it first, that it would unsettle me. And did it? No. But I resent the attempt. I leaned against the windowsill. Why leave it? She has no more proof. The photograph is public now. The negatives. Safe. So she signals, he said. A gesture. She knows we are circling. She wants to rattle the cage before we strike. I nodded. She's afraid. No, Wolfe said. She's warning us to be afraid. I looked at him. You think she's capable? I think she's desperate, and desperation inspires creativity. A knock interrupted us. Fritz Wolfe didn't speak. I opened the door. Fritz handed me a small envelope. Light, no return address. Came through the mail slot, he said. 5 minutes ago. Wolfe held out his hand. I passed it to him. He opened it slowly. Inside, a single photograph, not a new one. A copy, cropped tighter. Vivian's face almost blurred. Langdon's robe more visible. A red circle inked around. His left hand, the same hand that rested on her shoulder. A note was scrawled across the bottom. That touch ended 3 lives. How many more? No signature. Wolfe said nothing. I waited. Then, she is daring us. To do what? To choose between silence and confrontation. He rose. Get Saul, get Fred. I want them on Evelyn Merritt. Day and night. Yes, sir. Tell Kramer nothing. Not yet. I paused at the door. 1 glove, 1 photograph. Wolfe's voice was colder now. And 1 enemy, he said, who no longer pretends to be innocent. Outside, the city stirred under rain. Inside, the brownstone held its breath. The envelope arrived at 9:12 a.m., precisely the moment Wolfe was forking a cube of sautéed beef into his mouth. I heard the clink of metal on porcelain before Fritz reappeared in the doorway, brows pinched, white square in hand. Delivered at the stoop, sir. No return address. Wolfe scowled. You intercepted it. I opened the door only after I heard no further footsteps. The bell was not rung. Wolfe nodded once, as if Fritz had passed. A particularly arcane test. He extended his hand without a word. Fritz laid the envelope on the napkin beside the plate and exited. I hovered, mug in hand. The envelope was cream. No markings but Wolfe's name in a rushed scrawl. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. He wiped his fingers, picked up the envelope, and slit it cleanly with his thumb. The contents slid out with the gravity of a summons. A single photograph. I didn't need to see it. I knew the one. The same black and white print that had been making its rounds through this case like a bad penny. Vivian Temple, bare shoulders, soft smile, seated beside a man with judge's robes and a face that hinted at retirement and moral compromise. But this copy had been altered. Vivian's face had been scribbled out in harsh black ink. 5 strokes. Not random, deliberate, furious. The man beside her was untouched. On the back of the photograph, in tight block letters, was a note. She was only the beginning. Wolfe stared at it a long moment. His breathing, which rarely, deviated did now. 1 shallow inhale. I leaned over his shoulder. Postmarked. He turned the envelope over and nodded. Mailed from Midtown Station. No fingerprints, no doubt. Same photo, defaced. They're escalating, or clarifying. He pushed the photo toward me. The face is struck out. Yes, but not as threat, as dismissal. I examined the pen strokes. So it's not, she'll be next. It's, she doesn't matter. Wolfe touched his lips with 1 finger. Precisely. She was only the opening act. There was a silence in the room thick enough to choke on. Outside, a milk truck rumbled past, the only sound against the hush of the morning. I asked, you think the killer mailed this? I think the killer wanted me to see it, which is not the same. He rose, slowly. That alone told me the moment mattered. He stepped over to the safe, keyed in the combination, and placed the photograph inside without a word. He closed the door and pressed his fingers against the cold metal. I do not like being instructed, he said. Then don't open your mail. He shot me a look that had killed at least 2 previous cases before they began. I took a swallow of coffee and retreated a pace. You want me to pull the postal records? Do so, but futile. Whoever sent this did not wish to be traced. I moved to the red chair, folded myself into it. It's a performance. They're not just hiding. Something. They want us to follow. He nodded, returning to his own yellow seat with the gravity of an emperor reclaiming a throne. Vivian Temple was the fuse, he said. But the powder is judicial. I blinked. You think this goes to Judge Langdon? I do not think. I infer. The robe, the posture, the deference others grant him in silence. It is a justice's shadow, and shadows are cast only by those who once stood in light. The line was too elegant to interrupt. Wolfe continued, "And if someone is attempting to erase her, it is because the case has moved on, from scandal to consequence." He tapped the edge of the desk, once, twice, then silence. I waited. He said, "You will speak to Kramer, privately. Show him the image. Do not hand it over. He'll demand it. Let him." I stood. "Anything else?" He glanced to the orchid room. "Yes. Tell Theodore to keep the humidifier off today. The red glove disturbed the balance." "Which glove?" He closed, his eyes as if I'd spilled wine on scripture. "The one we discussed yesterday. Do try to retain continuity." I left, muttering to myself, envelope in pocket, wondering who exactly had decided to scribble out a woman's face and mail it, to a man who collected rare beer steins and despised any disruption after breakfast. Whoever it was, they weren't bluffing. They were writing the next act. I called Kramer from a payphone at 9th and Madison. He picked up like the receiver owed him money. "This better be good, Goodwin." "It's enlightening," I said, "and brief." A pause. "My office. 20 minutes." He hung up. Kramer's office smelled of tobacco, rust, and unspoken threats. He waved me in with a jerk of his thumb and motioned toward the seat, like he was doing me a favor. I stayed standing. "I'm here on Wolfe's behalf." God help me. I slid the envelope across his desk. He opened it, took out the photo and whistled low. "Same one we've seen. But, hell, that's new. Vivian's been erased, but not by us." He turned it over, read the message. She was only the beginning. He looked up at me, eyes narrowed. "This is a message. Or a misdirection." "No." He jabbed the photo with a forefinger. "This is personal. Whoever sent this wants Wolfe to connect dots we haven't seen." I said nothing. Kramer leaned back. "So what does the fat man think this means?" "That someone's clearing the stage. Temple's dead." "She's silent," I corrected. "Which for some people is worse." He grunted. "You have anything else?" I opened my notebook. "Wolfe believes Judge Harmon Langdon is the man in the photograph." Kramer didn't flinch. I continued. Loretta Klein confirmed he was being blackmailed. Something about a sentencing. Scandal. Kramer's jaw tightened. "Langdon retired 5 years ago. No complaints. No inquiries. Which makes him clean." "No, it makes him careful." He handed back the photo. "You didn't get this from me. You hear me?" Loud and awkward. I left him brooding. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe hadn't moved. Fritz had brought him another bottle of Monticello cider, unopened. The air in the office carried the scent of tulips and something dry. Ash, maybe. He looked up as I entered. "He took the bait." Kramer. "Doesn't nibble. He chews." "But yes." Wolfe nodded. "The photograph?" I handed it over. "Returned. As ordered." He placed it beside the original. The two images stared up from the desk. One pristine, the other defaced. "The scrawl is right-handed," he said. I blinked. "How can you tell?" "Pressure angles. Downstrokes heavier than up. Leftward slant inconsistent." "You're guessing." "I am observing." He tapped a pencil against his lips. "We must determine who benefits from making Temple irrelevant. Who else was in the room when it was taken? Not the issue. The issue is who wants us looking elsewhere." I said, "The judge." Wolfe shook his head. "The judge is the wound. Someone else is the surgeon." That sat in the air for a long moment. Wolfe continued. "This message was not delivered in panic. It was planned. That is what concerns me." "You think there'll be another?" He looked at the orchid room, then back to me. "I think there's already been one. We just haven't recognized it yet." I opened my mouth, then closed it. Wolfe raised a brow. "You wish to speak?" I was going to suggest going through Morgan's negatives again. All of them, even the ones he said were worthless. Wolfe nodded once. "Do so. Tonight." I stood, then hesitated. "What? You ever think someone's playing you?" "Constantly," Wolfe said, "but rarely with success." I left the room, the photograph heavy in my coat pocket. Its message scratched into the back of my brain like an itch that wouldn't go. In the hall, Fritz appeared from the kitchen holding a white cloth and a bowl of warm lemon water. He gave me a faint smile. "For the orchids," he said, passing by. Even the flowers were being cared for. Meanwhile, someone was scribbling faces off photographs and mailing them like invitations. And Wolfe, calmly, methodically, was preparing to RSVP. The morning was one of those brooding Manhattan affairs. all damp fog and dull brass light. It pooled in the creases of buildings, smeared across windshields, and crawled down the brownstone's front steps like it had a grievance to file. I was on my second cup of coffee when the front bell rang. Fritz didn't flinch. I was closer, so I made the trek. On the stoop stood Inspector Kramer, face like a bad verdict. His tan overcoat was darker at the shoulders from the drizzle. No cigar, just that jaw working side to side like it wanted to grind bone. "Morning, Inspector," I said. "Didn't think the weather could drive a man to penance. Don't start with me, Goodwin." He shoved past. "Where is he?" "In the plant room. He's with his orchids. Then he'll wait." He marched into the office, peeled off his gloves, and threw himself into one of the red chairs like it owed him money. I closed the door behind me and followed. "You look like you've been keeping company with the dead." "I have." He didn't wait for Wolfe to join us. "Judge, Langdon's dead." That stopped me. I lowered myself into the other red chair, letting the weight of that name hang in the room. "How?" I asked. "In a suite at the Roosevelt Hotel. Maid found him this morning." Kramer didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on Wolfe's empty yellow chair, bottle of bourbon, sleeping pills, and a note. "Typed?" I asked. "Handwritten. Letterhead from the hotel. You read it?" I did. He pulled a folded sheet from his coat. I recognized the Roosevelt watermark. The paper was still creased from its first confession. Kramer didn't hand it over. He read, "I have committed an unforgivable sin. Years ago, I passed a sentence I knew was wrong. I have lived with that weight ever since. I sought solace in the wrong places. I betrayed my office and myself. I loved a woman. I am sorry." He folded it again and dropped it into his lap. "No mention of the blackmail," I said. "No," Kramer replied. "Only the affair." We both knew that wouldn't have been enough to kill a man like Langdon. He'd survived hearings, elections, and the press. A love affair, that wasn't fatal. The door to the plant room swung open with Wolfe's usual inertia. He entered slowly, arms folded beneath his bulk like a Roman bust brought to life. His eyes flicked to Kramer, then the folded paper. "You're here early," Wolfe said. "Dead judge," Kramer replied. I surmised. "You said Langdon loud enough." Wolfe eased himself into the yellow chair. "I assume you have something more than a corpse and a typewritten apology." Kramer's jaw clenched. "It wasn't typed." "Then it was forged." Kramer blinked. "You haven't read it." "I don't need to." Wolfe leaned back. His eyes closed, but his voice remained perfectly awake. "No judge, in this city or elsewhere, pens his confession on hotel stationery. Not when he owns a house, maintains chambers, and possesses the discretion of a man in his station. That alone suggests orchestration." "He was under pressure," Kramer countered. "Guilt, exposure, not to the point of sloppiness." Wolfe opened his eyes. "And where was the envelope?" Kramer's brow furrowed. "What envelope? The one addressed to the press, or the police, or a law clerk? The one left beside the body?" "There wasn't one," Kramer admitted. "Just the letter, on the nightstand." Wolfe let silence do the underlining. "Who found him?" he asked. "Chambermaid, suite 812. And? She says he checked in alone yesterday afternoon. No visitors on record. Room service delivered dinner. Untouched." Wolfe turned to me. "Archie, if you will." I rose and went to my desk. The notebook was already open. Wolfe hadn't asked for a record, but he knew I'd kept one. "Langdon's last confirmed location was Thursday," I said. "Left the courthouse early. No appointments afterward. No one reported him missing." "He wasn't missing," Kramer said. "He was hiding." "No, he was placed," Wolfe replied. "Someone wanted him found. And not just dead. Guilty." Kramer sat back. "You think it was murder?" "I think it was performance. The note lacks specifics. The bourbon is theatre. The hotel room is camouflage. Whoever did this wants us to think it ended with Langdon. But you don't." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "No." Kramer's lips curled. Not quite a smirk. "Then tell me, genius, why the Roosevelt?" Wolfe looked toward the ceiling. Convenient, prestigious, and anonymous enough to accept a judge under an alias. He paused, which I presume was the case. Kramer nodded. "Checked in as James Halberd. A gavel reference," Wolfe murmured. "Charming." He shifted his bulk and closed his eyes once more. Someone needed the judge to die. But more than that, they needed the guilt to die with him. His voice dropped. That tells us the real crime is still alive. I could see it now. Langdon alone in a hotel suite, stripped of robes and influence. The grand figure reduced to a name on a guest register. Except it wasn't real. It was staging, and Wolfe smelled the curtain rope. Kramer exhaled sharply. The sound half growl, half concession. We dusted for prints. Only his. That confirms nothing, Wolfe replied. He was seen alive. Bellboy. Says he gave a tip when he brought up the bag. Wolfe's brow lifted. Was the bill large? Kramer blinked. $10. A generous sum. Enough to lodge the moment in memory. You see, Inspector, even the recollection of life can be manipulated. Kramer leaned forward, elbows on his knees. If it was a frame, it was airtight. Wolfe scoffed. There is no such thing. If it looks seamless, you've missed the seam. I could almost hear the file drawers clicking behind Wolfe's eyes. He turned to me. Archie. The woman with the gloves. Loretta Klein. She's vanished again? Not exactly. I left her in Brooklyn with a neighbor. I can make the call. Wolfe gave the smallest nod. She may not know the shape of this, but she knows the sound. Kramer stood and paced. You think she knew about the blackmail? I think she knew about the past. Langdon's skeleton wasn't buried. It was photographed. Kramer flinched. You think that's what this is all about? One bad sentence? One pattern, Wolfe corrected. One habit of judgment. One scandal buried in another. I stood. That photo, Vivian and the judge. The copy that came to the house with her face crossed out. Wolfe nodded slowly. It wasn't a threat. It was punctuation. The first body was a message. Kramer turned toward the window. Outside, the fog was curling against the glass like a cat against the wrong leg. You're going to say this isn't over? Wolfe didn't move. It has not even begun. He let that sit. Kramer turned back toward him. I can't reopen the case based on your instincts. I don't expect you to, Wolfe replied. I expect you to wait. Wait for what? For whoever killed Langdon to grow confident. Or careless. Kramer's mouth pulled tight. And what if he, or she, doesn't? Wolfe opened his eyes fully. They will. They've come too far not to. Kramer folded his gloves. Once. Twice. If this goes wrong, I'll be the one who gets it from the commissioner. You already are, Wolfe said gently. Kramer nodded once and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Was Langdon a good man, Wolfe? Wolfe looked at him. He was a man. That's enough burden to carry. Kramer left without another word. The office fell into its quiet rhythms. Wolfe closed his eyes. I pulled the photo from the case file. Vivian, Langdon, the blurred edges of a life no longer hidden. Did he write the note himself? I asked. No, Wolfe replied. I waited. He didn't elaborate. I leaned back and studied him. You think the same hand that mailed the photo penned the confession? No. Different mind. Same purpose. One kills the man. The other kills the truth. The lamp cast a gold sheen across Wolfe's features. He looked tired, but not weary. Focused, but not hurried. He never rushed. Not even for murder. He gestured toward the file. Keep the photo near. It will prove useful. I tucked it into the desk drawer. Outside, horns blared faintly in the fog. A trolley bell clanged down 35th. Life went on. Inside, Wolfe opened a hand. Call Miss Klein. I reached for the receiver. She'll be frightened, I said. She should be, Wolfe replied. Then he closed his eyes again, as if nothing in the world could reach him. But it already had. The brownstone sat in a hush so absolute, the ticking of the hall clock struck like a chisel. The afternoon light had begun to fade, and outside, Manhattan rattled and wheezed like a distant thought. Inside, Fritz moved like smoke, quiet, exacting, taking Archie's coat with the reverence of a ritual. The bell rang again. One tone, flat, unhurried. I opened the door. Lester Broom stood framed in the vestibule, one glove on, the other folded in his hand. His suit was pressed to perfection, and his smile, tight-lipped and fleeting, belonged to a man who polished his lies. Before breakfast. Mr. Wolfe sent for me? He asked. Yes, I said. And here you are. He stepped in. I caught the faintest scent of bay rum and the firmer scent of worry, trailing him like a second shadow. I led him down the hall. The office was dressed in its usual armor. Velvet, drapes drawn back precisely. Lamplight warm but not indulgent. Wolfe behind his desk, silent, looming in his yellow chair. The fire hummed low in the hearth, casting faint orange across the parquet. Wolfe didn't rise. Broom hesitated at the threshold, then moved toward the guest chairs, 3 lined in blood-red leather. "Sit," I offered, not unkindly. He picked the one near the fire. I watched him register the creak beneath him, then glanced down, almost annoyed. I moved to stand behind the globe. Wolfe didn't speak. Time passed. Broom cleared his throat. "I wasn't expecting another meeting, Mr. Wolfe. Nothing. I assume this concerns Judge Langdon." Still silence. "I mean, well, it's a tragedy, of course. But if you're here to suggest—" He faltered. Wolfe leaned back, fingers steepled. He blinked once. The tension was not in the air. It was the air. Broom shifted. "When you called, I assumed it was to clarify something. Some confusion, perhaps. My boss, Senator Lark, has always—" Wolfe lifted one hand, not a word, just the gesture, and Broom obeyed. Silence returned. 5 more seconds passed before Wolfe spoke. "You sat in the wrong chair." Broom blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You sat in the wrong chair," Wolfe repeated. "That one creaks. You avoided it during your first visit. I didn't notice." "You did. You shifted after 2 seconds. You remember. I don't believe that's relevant." "I do." Broom forced a chuckle. "I think you're reading too much into posture." "No," Wolfe said. "You're saying too little with too much voice." Broom blinked again. Wolfe stared. "You came here because I baited you, not with proof, with silence. Silence is the one thing you've never managed." Broom opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes moved to me, searching for a safer harbor. "I didn't kill anyone," he said finally. "Not what I asked," Wolfe replied. Broom exhaled through his nose. "I came to cooperate." Wolfe didn't reply. Instead, he reached into his drawer and removed a single photograph. Gil Morgan's final development. Wolfe slid it onto the blotter. "Judge Langdon, Vivian Trask, taken the night before she died. Do you know who took it?" Broom's eyes lingered a beat too long. "I don't." Wolfe nodded. "Odd," I said. "You just denied recognizing it, not knowing who took it. Different denials, Mr. Broom." He swallowed. "I only saw it when the press published it." "That one," Wolfe said, tapping the print, "was never published." Broom opened his mouth. Wolfe rose. "You're not good at this," he said. Broom's fists curled. Wolfe walked around the desk, slowly, deliberately. "Judge Langdon was found in his hotel room," he said. "A suicide. A note written on Roosevelt Hotel stationery." Broom said nothing. "No judge writes a confession on a hotel notepad," Wolfe continued. "Not unless he intends to be believed. Langdon's letter was real in its ink, not in its soul." Broom stood. Wolfe didn't stop him. He took one step toward the door. "I blocked it." "Sit," Wolfe said again. Broom sat. "You aren't clever," Wolfe murmured. "You're rehearsed." He returned to his chair. "Archie." I went to the side table, removed the sealed envelope, placed it before Broom. "Found in the kitchen waste," I said. "Burnt on one edge. The handwriting matches Gil Morgan's." Broom's eyes flared. "Coincidence." "To VT, Brownstone," Wolfe said. Broom stood again, slower now, not defiant, cornered. "I never sent that." "I never said you did," Wolfe replied. "But you tried to burn it." Broom didn't move. The fire cracked in the grate. Wolfe's voice was quiet again. "Guilt has a scent, Mr. Broom, and yours arrived before you." Broom looked down. "Call Kramer," Wolfe said. "I didn't need to be told twice." Broom sat again. He didn't speak, and Wolfe, now that he'd said enough, didn't either. Broom remained frozen, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, like a man, rehearsing stillness. I left the room briefly to place the call. Kramer's voice came through in a low rasp. I didn't need to say much. By now, Wolfe's name had become its own signature on the department line. "Don't let him move," Kramer said. I returned. Broom hadn't shifted. Wolfe's yellow chair creaked softly as he settled in again, eyes on his guest. There was no anger, only weight. Wolfe at full gravity. I resumed my usual station near the wall. Broom cleared his throat. "If you believe I did it," he said, "you're mistaken." Wolfe didn't blink. "I have no illusions about your innocence," he said. "Only your nerve." Broom's face twitched. The corner of his mouth twitched next. He turned his head just enough to avoid Wolfe's gaze. Wolfe poured himself a glass of water from the carafe beside him. took a sip, then leaned forward. "The red gloves," he said. "Yours." Broom flinched. Wolfe didn't wait. "You visited the orchids. You dropped one glove. You thought it would go unnoticed." "I've never stepped foot near those flowers." Wolfe raised a brow. "Theodore found it beside a dendrobium. Coincidence?" "You enjoy that word." Broom stood. "This is absurd." He reached for his coat. I stepped forward. "No," Wolfe said. "Let him." Broom's fingers paused. On the lapel, then, awkwardly, fell away. He sat slower this time. Wolfe watched him fold. "Judge Langdon kept his secrets," Wolfe said. "But you didn't count on Vivian." Broom said nothing. "Vivian discovered the sentencing bribe. The blackmail. She told someone." Wolfe leaned back. "The judge tried to cover it." Broom's voice cracked. "He wasn't innocent." "No," Wolfe agreed. "But she was." That silenced him. The room exhaled once, then went still again. Broom stared into the fire, as if it might offer better answers than Wolfe had. Wolfe let him stew. Archie Goodwin, that's me, knows when Wolfe has won. It isn't in the volume, it's in the quiet. Broom shifted again. Then, foolishly, he tried for a smile. "You've no proof." Wolfe tapped the envelope again. "Enough for Kramer. That's circumstantial. Kramer's threshold for satisfaction is lower than mine." The bell rang. Twice. I stepped to the hall and opened the door. Kramer came in. Damp coat, heavy boots, and the face of a man forced into trust by repetition. He didn't need directions. He saw Broom, and his jaw set. "I'll take it from here," he said. Broom stood, but not straight. Wolfe addressed Kramer with half a nod. "Don't let him talk you into believing this was regret." "It wasn't?" "No," Wolfe said. "It was panic in stages." Kramer gestured, and Broom walked forward, slowly. The moment passed without drama, which, in Wolfe's office, is often the truest sign of guilt. After they were gone, Wolfe rose again. He moved to the window, watched the street, didn't speak. He stood with his back to me, hands folded behind him. I poured a brandy, offered it. He declined. Instead, he returned to his chair, sank into it as though the weight of the day had multiplied. "You knew it was Broom from the start?" I asked. "No," he said, "but I suspected." The moment he looked at the photo, everyone looks at the photo, Wolfe nodded, but not all remember the lens. That hung between us. The fire whispered, and somewhere in the kitchen, Fritz was chopping something, a faint rhythm of steel on board. I turned to leave, but Wolfe spoke once more. "Judges die," he said. "Yes, sir." "Justice," he murmured. "Should not." Then he closed his eyes, and I left him to the dark. Wolfe had not risen from his chair, nor had he spoken since Lester Broom left in a sweat-slick haze an hour earlier. But the air in the office was not still. It was tense, like the final second before a verdict. I sat on the edge of my desk, flipping the corner of the morning edition with my thumb, not reading, just waiting. Fritz entered quietly, his tray balanced with obsessive precision. He laid down the saucer, poured the coffee, and slipped out without a word. The yellow chair remained empty. "Archie." Wolfe's voice was low, but not weary. "Yes, sir." "You've reviewed the transcript of Klein's statement?" "I had. 3 times. She didn't lie. She flinched." "There's a difference." Wolfe closed his eyes. Broom feared exposure. Not from Langdon. From her. Vivian. He opened them. "No. Loretta." That hit harder than I expected. "You're saying the blackmail didn't originate from Langdon's office? No judge drafts confessions on Roosevelt Hotel stationery, but an operative in need of a clean slate. That is something else." I stood and walked to the windows. The Manhattan skyline glared back, sharp, clean, cruel. "What's the angle?" "Electioneering." Wolfe's eyes tracked mine in the glass. Broom wasn't simply protecting himself. He was laundering. "What reputations?" I turned back. "Langdon's and another's." Fritz reappeared without knocking. That alone signaled urgency. He held out a telegram. I took it. Langdon's body was confirmed. Slumped in a chair, a revolver on the floor, and one clean hole through the head. The note lay neatly on the nightstand, written in a practiced hand. No smudges, no hesitation. "He wasn't afraid," I muttered. "He was erased." Wolfe tapped the armrest once, twice. "Archie, call Kramer. Tell him we request a meeting." I raised an eyebrow. You're making the first move. Wolfe did not respond. That, in itself, was a response. Lieutenant Kramer arrived just past 4. He wore his usual grimace, though it looked heavier than usual today. He nodded at me, then gave Wolfe a look that could have shaved bark. Let's get this damn circus over with. Sit, Wolfe said, motioning to the red chair to his right. Kramer did. He crossed his legs with more force than necessary and tugged the folder from his coat. It landed with a dull slap on the desk. There's your judge. Thank you, Wolfe said, glancing at the folder but not opening it. What was omitted? Kramer didn't flinch. You think I'd hide details from you? I think you were told to. Kramer's fingers twitched once, then stilled. He was clean, the lieutenant muttered. Not perfect, but cleaner than most. Wolfe folded his hands. And yet, you're not convinced he wrote the note? Because he didn't, I said, leaning forward. Broom did. Kramer gave me a look that belonged in an alley, not a study. You boys got something hard? Or just that yellow chair intuition? Wolfe took a breath. Broom, he said, manipulated 2 threads. One pulled on Langdon's past, the other on Vivian's discovery. She believed Langdon was the spider, but Broom had wrapped them both. Kramer grunted. Any proof? Not yet, I admitted. But we have behavior. And a glove, Wolfe added. Kramer blinked. What? Wolfe turned to me. Archie. I opened the desk drawer and produced the evidence, carefully sealed. The red leather glove. Kramer stared. I thought you said this was found in the orchid room. It was, I confirmed. And it wasn't there yesterday. Vivian's? Wolfe shook his head. Evelyn Merritt wore blue. Loretta wore none. Only Broom's secretary, Miss Greer, wore red, and she hasn't been back. Not voluntarily. Kramer rubbed his temple. So she planted it? No, Wolfe said sharply. He did. The silence that followed was heavy. Then why her glove? Kramer asked. Wolfe steepled his fingers. To divide our suspicion. Broom is a coward in clever clothing. He doesn't fight. He infects. It was dark by the time Kramer left, the city bleeding its usual noise against the windows. I poured Wolfe a fresh glass of beer, placed it beside him, and sat. You really believe Greer didn't know? I asked. She knew, Wolfe said. But knowledge does not always equal guilt. She kept quiet. So did Klein. I drummed my fingers on the armrest. So, what's next? Wolfe looked toward the hallway. Tomorrow, we close it. He reached for his glass, paused, and gave a rare glance my way. Bring Broom, and Klein, and the others. I stood. Trap time? No. He sipped. Truth time. The next morning began with rain. It wasn't a storm, just a steady whisper against the windows, soft and unhurried. Fritz brewed the coffee stronger than usual. Even he sensed the day would be exacting. By 10 o'clock, the office held 4 guests and 1 trap. Lester Broom arrived first, flanked by the tailored mask he wore so well. Miss Greer trailed behind, eyes hollow but alert. Loretta Klein entered third, visibly shaken but composed. And finally Kramer, who walked in without knocking, lit a cigar and said, "If this is a stunt, Wolfe, I'm walking." Wolfe inclined, his head. "Please, Lieutenant, your patience will be brief and rewarded." I stood by the wall, pad ready, revolver holstered. Fritz had laid out nothing but water and cloth napkins. The yellow chair stood vacant. "Mr. Broom," Wolfe said without preamble, "you claimed to be concerned for your reputation." Broom smiled. "That's correct." "Then sit and speak." He hesitated, just long enough to register the challenge. Then, obediently, he walked to the yellow chair and lowered himself into its embrace. Wolfe did not smile. "I presume," Broom said, crossing one leg, "this is where you reveal I'm the villain." "No," Wolfe replied. "This is where you reveal it." Broom's brow creased. "I beg your pardon?" Wolfe leaned forward. "You blackmailed Judge Langdon. You blackmailed Vivian Marlowe. When Morgan uncovered too much, you silenced him. When Vivian threatened to expose you, you removed her. All to protect a campaign whose success meant more to you than their lives." Broom gave a low chuckle. "That's quite the monologue. It's quite the motive." I saw Kramer shift in the corner. Cigar paused mid-air. "Do you have proof?" Broom asked. "Yes," Wolfe said. "And you're sitting in it." Broom's smile vanished. Miss Greer flinched. Loretta looked down at her hands. Wolfe gestured, toward the desk drawer. I opened it. The second photograph lay inside. I held it up. This, I said, was mailed to us yesterday. Same image, different message. Broom didn't move. Wolfe continued. Vivian's face was defaced with a pen scribbled out. A warning, yes, but not to us. To the others. To whom? Broom asked, too quickly. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. To anyone who thought of crossing you. Broom scoffed. A scrawled picture. That's the great evidence. No, Wolfe said softly. This is. He reached for a second envelope. Inside, the hotel stationery. The suicide note. Typed. No judge, Wolfe murmured. With any intention of death types a confession. Miss Greer inhaled sharply. Broom's shoulders tensed. Langdon didn't. Write it, Wolfe continued. You did, or had it done. You staged it, mailed the image, planted a glove, all while pretending to be the one who needed protection. You have no witnesses. Loretta stood. I saw the ledger, she said, voice trembling. It had names, donations, code entries. Langdon's was there. So was Vivian's. Impossible, Broom snapped. I burned it, she whispered. But I saw it. Broom turned to Wolfe. This is madness. Then leave, Wolfe replied. You're free to go. Broom stood. Too fast. Kramer stepped forward. Not so fast. Broom turned. On what charge? Forgery, Wolfe said. To start. Kramer's grin was razor thin. Let's test it downtown. Miss Greer rose, tearful, and followed them both out the door. The room was silent again. Loretta stood by the window, watching the rain trace crooked paths down the glass. I poured her a glass of water. She nodded thanks. Wolfe said nothing. When she left, I sat down opposite him. You were sure, I said. I was exact, he replied. I nodded. Still, gutsy move. He closed his eyes. In logic, there is no bravery, only clarity. Still, I said, damn satisfying. That night, Manhattan felt cleaner. Not by much, but just enough for a man to believe in balance again. Wolfe didn't mention the case over dinner, nor did he touch the wine. As Fritz cleared the plates, Wolfe looked toward the fireplace and said, Greer will testify. She was afraid, not complicit. I nodded. He tapped his fingers on the armrest once. Then again. Then silence. A silence I had learned meant closure. I poured him a brandy, left it on the side table, and turned out the light. The office, at last, could rest. The knock came heavy, low, and final. I opened the door. Lieutenant Kramer stood there with the weight of resignation clinging to his shoulders. His cigar hung from the corner of his mouth, lit but forgotten. Behind him, 2 uniforms waited at the curb, engine humming. Lo, where is he? Kramer asked. In the office, I said. Waiting. He stepped past me, nodding at nothing, his coat shoulders damp from a drizzle that had barely started. He didn't remove his hat, didn't shake off the wet. He walked through the brownstone like a man approaching a dentist. Inside the office, Wolfe didn't rise. He didn't speak. Kramer halted just past the threshold. His eyes landed on Lester Broom, seated again in the red chair, hands folded, face still. A single bead of sweat clung to the tip of his nose. Kramer sighed. So this is how it ends. Broom didn't reply. Kramer took the cigar from his mouth and stared at it. I got a wire from Langley this morning. Vivian's letters. They're authentic. They match the paper, the ribbon, the address, and the tone. Broom blinked once. Kramer continued. The ledger turned up in a burned safe in Morgan's old office, or what was left of it. You torched the place sloppy. Still no reply. Kramer turned to Wolfe. Next time, just send me a telegram. Save me the legwork. I find legwork keeps the mind trim, Wolfe said. Kramer snorted. Just once, Wolfe. Just once I'd like to get there first. Wolfe's mouth lifted at the corner. You'd lose interest if you did. I'd sleep better. You don't sleep, Wolfe said. You smoulder. Kramer grunted. He stepped forward and reached into his coat, removing the pair of cuffs. Broom stood, silently, hands behind, his back. As the steel clicked home, Broom murmured, It's all a game to you. No, Kramer said. You made it one. He just plays better. I stepped aside as they passed. Broom didn't look at me. Kramer did. Cherry toast? Coming up, I said. He shook his head. You two are insufferable. The door closed. I turned back to Wolfe. He hadn't moved. He rarely did. You enjoyed that, I said. Only moderately. I walked to the sideboard, took down 2 glasses and poured a neat bourbon into each. Wolfe lifted his without comment. The silence held, long and warm, as the storm whispered against the glass. Then Wolfe said, "He'll bargain. There's another name. You think he'll talk?" Wolfe sipped. "Eventually. Men like Broom always do. Ego clings to an audience." Fritz entered just then, carrying a covered tray. He set it down gently on the desk blotter, removed the silver lid, and revealed the morning's crown jewel. Cherry toast. Real cherry. Not extract. Not jam. Cherries. Wolfe regarded it. "Well," he said, "it's either a bribe or a celebration." Fritz replied, "Both, sir." Wolfe took a bite. He didn't smile, but he didn't criticize either, which by his standards was rapture. Kramer's footsteps had barely faded when Wolfe set down his glass. "I shall require the full case file," he said. "From the beginning." "You have it," I replied. "Twice over, labelled and indexed." "Your index," Wolfe said, "lacks imagination. I'll write that on your gravestone." "Do," he murmured. He reached for another piece of cherry toast. That made 2, a rare indulgence that would be cited in future disputes as precedent. Fritz lingered by the doorway, pretending to fuss with a napkin, but watching Wolfe with priestly satisfaction. I dropped into my chair. "I don't like Broom," I said. "I find that to be both natural and commendable," Wolfe replied. "He's not done," I added. "No," Wolfe said, "but he's slowed. A man in custody is less dangerous, more interesting." The fire crackled in the grate. Manhattan moaned under its own grey sky. Somewhere in the distance, a horn wailed long and low, like a memory being dragged into the river. I said, "Do you think Kramer will dig up the rest?" "He will try," Wolfe said. "That is his profession. But his leash shortens. When politics bite, and there are teeth in this mess." Wolfe stood. That, too, was rare. He crossed to the window, lifting the curtain slightly with a single thick finger. Outside, rain slicked the iron railings and blackened the brick. A taxi paused at the curb, idled, then moved on. He dropped the curtain. "Vivian was not the first casualty," he said, "and she won't be the last if the machine is allowed to continue." That sounds like a man with moral conviction. Wolfe turned. "I have appetite. Morality is merely a garnish." I chuckled. Fritz cleared his throat. "Shall I prepare the noon meal, sir?" "Yes," Wolfe said, "but for 6, not 12. I shall be taking the first tray in the conservatory." "Very good, sir." Fritz vanished like smoke. I said, "That, a protest?" "No, a restoration. The orchids suffer in my absence. And us? You thrive on hardship." I lifted my bourbon in salute. "To hardship, then." Wolfe did not return the toast, but he did take another bite of cherry toast. For him, that passed as applause. I leaned back, letting the chair creak just enough to remind him I was still there. "Think Broom's candidate will survive?" "No," Wolfe said, "but something worse may rise in his place." "Optimistic as ever," Wolfe sighed. "Optimism is the enemy of inquiry." "You're full of enemies today." He didn't reply. The rain intensified, beating steadily on the sill. In the next room, Fritz could be heard arranging cutlery with the reverence of a surgeon. The world had shifted again, slightly, and for once, Wolfe hadn't resisted. He had even eaten toast. Real cherry. Archie Goodwin. Mark the date. Wolfe returned to his chair, settled back, and closed his eyes. The case was nearly done, and for once, nobody argued. The snowfall had started sometime after lunch, when Manhattan had that hush it gets before nightfall. I'd cracked open the window just enough to hear the sound of tires swishing over slush. Wolfe hates that noise, naturally, but I liked the reminder that the world outside was still turning. Inside the brownstone, the storm hadn't reached. Not yet. I was in the office, alone, penning up the final notes for the file. The handwriting had to be legible, Wolfe's rule. Not that he ever read the finished report unless something itched at him, and this one itched. Not because of the bodies, though there were 2 of those. Not because of the lies either. We're used to those. No, what stuck was simpler. It was the blonde. She'd walked in like trouble in perfume, like they always do. But she hadn't been the scandal. The men were. The ones who thought silence came cheap. The ones who thought beauty would stay bought. There was a knock. Not Fritz. I checked my watch and got up to let the inspector in. Kramer entered with the usual grunt, snow in his collar and frustration trailing behind him like cheap cologne. He didn't say a word as he handed me a sealed envelope, then brushed past into the office proper. I followed. Wolfe was in his chair. Yellow, worn, loyal. He was rubbing the corner of his jaw with 2 fingers. Thinking, or brooding. With Wolfe, it's a hairline distinction. Kramer tossed the envelope on the desk. Final confirmation, he said. Wolfe didn't reach for it. We have no need of that. Mr. Broom will confess. Kramer gave a half snort. He's got a lawyer, and a face like cold oatmeal. I wouldn't count on a confession. You need not, Wolfe said, and closed his eyes. The facts suffice. I sat, crossed my legs, and cracked the seal on the envelope. It was from the DA's office. Inside were photographs, clear ones, good resolution for 1949. One showed Broom and Judge Langdon, private dinner, wrong company, worse timing. The rest spoke for themselves. Kramer didn't sit. He stalked over to the drinks tray, poured himself a double bourbon, and drank it, in silence. Then he turned, looked at Wolfe, and offered one of those rare, quiet acknowledgements he saves for the end of a war. Well, he muttered, she didn't stay quiet after all. No, Wolfe murmured. Nor should she have. Kramer headed for the door without another word. When it closed behind him, Wolfe finally opened his eyes. She was not suited to obedience, he said. I nodded. Neither are you. He didn't. Smile. Exactly. But there was a crease at the corner of his mouth. A rare one. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the truth had settled like dust on velvet. Unmoved by drama. Unmoved by blood. Only the orchid room hummed faintly upstairs. Patient and green. Waiting for morning. I joined Wolfe in silence, pouring 2 bourbons. One for me, one for the atmosphere. He didn't drink his. He rarely did. But rituals mattered. In that house, even when the war was over. He sat still for a long time, long enough that I thought he might drift into orchid thought. That curious trance he enters when the work is done, but the world hasn't caught up. But he stayed with me. I find, he said at last, that contentment has become suspect. I sipped mine. Too rare to trust, too easily mistaken for peace. I nodded. Not that he needed the agreement. He wasn't really speaking to me. He was addressing the air, the ghosts, the pattern of the thing now folded into his mind like the structure of a flower he'd memorized in childhood. The fire crackled. The snow outside glowed blue against the window panes. Archie. Yes, sir. Do you recall what I said when Vivian entered this room for the first time? She wore red gloves. You said it was a poor choice. No. Before that, I closed my eyes, recalled the angle of her chin, the tremor in her voice. You said, this is not a woman come for rescue. This is a woman who's already decided someone must lose. Wolfe nodded once, almost imperceptibly. She chose. Then she lost. I looked at him. But not the way they wanted. No, he said. Not the way they wanted. Then Fritz appeared, his steps soft, his expression unreadable. In his hands, a silver tray, warm linen over warm china. Toast? He offered, with all the gravity of a priest unveiling sacrament. Wolfe arched an eyebrow. Cherry? He asked. Fritz gave the faintest of smiles. The real kind, yes. No tricks. Wolfe took a slice. I did the same. Partly from hunger, partly from reverence. The flavor was rich, bright, slightly bitter, like truth with sugar on top. Wolfe chewed, considered, then spoke without looking at either of us. It is tolerable. Fritz beamed. I chuckled and set down my bourbon. The file would wait until morning. The city would too. Snow doesn't rush. From the corner of my eye, I saw Wolfe glance toward the orchid room. Not for the blooms, for the quiet. He spoke once, more, voice, softer than usual. The orchid room is less peaceful than politics. I let the line hang. Some things deserve silence more than laughter. Outside, Manhattan blanketed itself in white. Cabs hissed along curbs. A newspaper boy shouted once, then was lost to the wind. I thought of Vivian, of Morgan, of Broom and Langdon and the tangled net we'd just torn down. And I thought again of what I'd written in my notes. It wasn't. The blonde who caused the scandal. It was the men who thought she'd stay quiet. I would keep that line. Wolfe closed his eyes again, this time for real. The orchid room would call him soon. But for now, we sat in quiet triumph, surrounded by warmth, bourbon, and the very rare cherry toast that hadn't killed anyone at all.